Good morning. This morning, I want to talk about prayer, the power of prayer, and how to pray for those of us that are non-religious. Uh-oh. Okay, we're okay. Car did something funny. So, what do I mean by that? So, basically, I mean for anyone who's agnostic, like myself, and what I mean by agnostic is if anyone who does not assume that they know, that believes in the limited perceptual capacity of individual humans. And I think all of the latest science really confirms that. And if you think deep through philosophical traditions, you're going to find that that's the case as well. So basically, what I'm saying is, not what I'm saying, got distracted because I had to look at my directions. Okay, so prayer for agnostics, I don't think it would really work for atheists, but for agnostics. So I'm an agnostic. A long time ago, when I was trying to figure out spirituality, I was introduced to the work of Joseph Campbell and found in his work a universal spirituality which just makes the most sense. And ever since that time, I've been really interested in how do we actually find a spiritual practice that is consistent with modern day understanding of the universe. So for a lot of years, I personally struggled with God. Like, what is God? How do I relate to God? And Joseph Campbell talks about how God, there's two ways to relate to God. One is you can relate to God as this creator. So some entity that bursts life into, not life, but everything into existence. Or you can think about God as the totality of everything, just the structure that holds together the universe. So, in our we need we need spirituality, we need religion, and you can see that we need religion because there are so many people that adopt religions that are totally inconsistent with our modern day understanding of the world. The only reason that they do that is because there's no really other viable option. So what I'm trying to do in this talk is to share the viable option that I've come up with in terms of my prayer, my spirituality as an agnostic who believes in the power of religion and God and those kind of ideas. So God is, so humans have a limited capacity to see the universe, and you have to, if you're a rational thinking being and you've spent any time trying to really, without ego and without attachment, think through these things, you have to know that you ultimately will come to a point where you realize that you are limited in your perception and you can't really know what's going on. You're just going to get this little tiny slice. So from that perspective, God is, in your mind, a representation of something that's transcendent. So Joseph Campbell, I love the way he says it. He says, the transcendent is transcendent. So what does that mean? That means that you can't talk about it. You can't relate to it. You have sort of these glimpses of it, but frankly, people who are like talking about this, intimate relationship that they have with God, they're just, I'm sorry, you guys, but if you're listening to this, I'm sorry if this pisses you off, but you're deluding yourself because you can't actually talk about it or think about it. Like, God is transcendent to you. Now you have feeling, and that's probably the best way to think about it, is the feeling that you have. And that feelings are pretty much what we mean when we're talking about God. So let's get back to agnostics and prayer. So I do a prayer every morning, and I've been really trying to figure out how to connect all of these elements in a way that is total. So when I pray in the morning, the first thing that I do is it's a prayer of gratitude. I thank Mother Earth for life. And then I thank Grandmother Ocean for life. If you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, we are 4 billion years old. Our consciousness began with the first cellular life, the first, maybe it began farther back. Maybe there's a consciousness to inanimate objects. It's just easier, I think, for the modern mind to wrap our consciousness, wrap an idea around that consciousness comes out of a living entity. You know, the plant reaches for the sun. That's a movement. It's a consciousness. It's a feeling, so to speak. So we're 4 billion years old. So I'm grateful to my mother, the Earth system that holds that, and Grandmother Ocean that provided the environment for my oldest ancestors. And then now here's the thing that people don't really talk about. I call it Great Grandmother Universe. Why do I call it Great Grandmother Universe? Because Mother is the material matter, the birthplace of life. So we start with the Earth, because that's our immediately around us. We go back to the ocean, because that's where it all began. And then we go even further back into the universe, the birth of the planets, the birth of the stars, those birthing places. So that's what I would call the feminine aspect of the prayer that I'm doing. And then I go to the ancestor prayer. So an ancestor prayer is, in a modern context, an ancestor prayer is, I'm grateful to my mother and my father for the life that they gave me. I would not be here without them. Oops. Should have been paying more attention there. Oops. Blew it. I gotta be careful. Not safe. Got a little too animated there. Okay. Back on track. Driving safe now. Back to talking. This is just when I have time to do these talks, so I'd love to do it and just sitting in a dedicated room with a microphone, but life is not affording that opportunity right now. So my ancestor worship starts with mother and father. They gave me this life. Like, no matter how shitty your parents might have been, without it, you're not here. You know, I mean, that deserves a level of gratitude. And then I was coaching someone the other day, and I said to him this, I never really articulated this well, until you reach a place, what is that smell? Oh, bummer. Car stuff happening. Wow, that's no good. I might have to pull over. Well, that might have been outside. I'm not gonna worry about it. Okay, unedited live talks. So I was coaching this guy, and I realized that until you get to a point where you can actually be grateful to all the crappy things that happen in your life, especially and including the mistakes that your parents imposed upon you, you're never gonna have the fullness of your power and freedom. You have to get to that place. And that looks like coming to love who you've become through your challenges. It doesn't mean that you condone their actions if they were awful. It means that you've learned to find the beauty in that. So back to ancestor worship. You start with your parents, you go to your grandparents, your great-grandparents, you keep going back. And then go back through the ancients, in the founders in your country, and then we're so poly from everywhere, so that's not even really a good way to do it, but just the threads go back throughout humanity, and they branch out farther and farther and farther. And then you got to go back past the human ancestors to the pre-human ancestors, to the primates and to the mammals, and then farther back. Right now I'm watching The History of Life on Netflix with my daughter, and it's really visually giving me architecture to make this ancestor prayer. And you go back, keep going farther and farther and farther back until you get through, the collapse of the dinosaurs and the mammals that survived that, and then through the first mammals that came out, or the first vertebrates that came out of the water, and the transition to the mammals, and all the way back. Those are all your ancestors and deserve your reverence. And then all the way back to the very beginning of life. So giving gratitude to all of those ancestors then connects you to them and connects you to the power of them. And opens your heart to them. And then the other part of that is, the next part is I give gratitude to the brothers and sisters. So right now I'm driving through beautiful Northern California, all the trees and the grasses and the insects and the birds. Those are all my brothers and sisters. They all contribute to literally to my food in my mouth, to the place that I live, to the air that I breathe, to the water that I drink. They contribute to everything. So I give thanks to them. And then, this is a key part too, then going all the way back through those ancestors. So there are, every form of life went all the way back. And each one of those, all of those are your brothers and sisters' ancestors. And so all of that history, that deep history of the life systems, they all contributed to who you are today and to what you get to experience today. All the way back to the beginning. So now you've given thanks to Mother Earth, Grandmother Ocean, great-grandmother Universe, to your ancestors all the way back, to your brothers and sisters and their ancestors all the way back. Then the next aspect is what I would call the masculine aspect, which is what has taken over in Western civilization. And that is giving thanks to your father, the father element. And that father element is associated not with the mother, not with Mother Earth. It's father civilization. It's father technology. It's father individuality. So those are all aspects to be venerated and revered, just as the mother. So here's where I think our society is off track. There's basically two camps: people who want to worship the father aspect and people who want to worship the mother aspect. And you got to do both, or you're being a dingbat. I'm sorry to just be so blunt about it, but that's the way it is. If you don't have civilization, you don't have a car, you don't have a phone. If you don't have individuality, you don't have capital, you don't have markets, But if you don't have the mother, you don't have life. So all of those things, in a way, they're great, but in the old traditions, the father element was secondary to the mother element. And I'm sorry to say it, dudes, but we're second. We want to think we're on top, but without that life essence, that birth essence, we're toast. So we have an important, powerful function to play in society, in civilization, but civilization and technology and civilization, technology, individuality, those are all embedded in nature. But I think, at this point in life, it's time to give them equal merit, even though all those things are embedded inside of the nature component. So the father, again, is technology, individuality, civilization, the sun, the energy aspect. Sorry, I gotta make a turn here. I want to be safe. Safe. So that's my morning prayer practice. That's completely consistent with modern scientific understanding. So that's the problem with spirituality these days or with religion these days, is that it's not consistent with what we know. So these are all consistent with what we know. And then another thing I'd like to bring point out in terms of what Joseph Campbell says, and he nailed it. He was one of the greatest scholars of all time, in mythological realms, psychological realms, philosophical realms. The man was better studied and so deep. We're only beginning to understand the stuff that he brought forth. But here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that all religion is true in this sense. It's all true in that it mirrors a true aspect of the human experience, of the human condition. The death and resurrection cycle, which the Christian tradition holds so dear, has popped up in cultures independently all over the world. Why is that? Because it's a universal aspect of our spiritual condition. So there's two ways that you can read religion. You can read it as a literal event that happened in a literal place at a literal time, or you can read it as a true energy, a true symbol that points to something transcendent that is real. It's transcendent and real, and we can't put words and ideas to it. So the best thing that we can come to is a story or a piece of artwork or some sort of other representation that points at it, but is insufficient to describe it. So when you point at the idea of a Buddha or a Jesus or a Muhammad, it's insufficient. It's not ever going to quite tell you what's going on there. So in this idea of a prayer practice for agnostics, for those of us who need ideas that are consistent with modern understanding of the universe, if you do these two things where you honor that all of the religious systems point to a truth about the human condition inside of the universe, and you have to have, I think what we're missing in the more secular circle and the more agnostic circle is the admission that you have to have a spiritual practice. You have to have some sort of reverence or prayer for something larger than yourself, or your life goes flat. You can't quite put it all together. I know so many people are struggling today because of that. So this is my attempt at putting out into the world a more universal flavor. So you can use the stories in the Bible, you can use the stories in the Upanishads, you can use the stories of the Buddha, and you can use the stories in indigenous cultures, and you can use the stories of Confucianism and Taoism. If you put them in a context of that, they point to a deeper meaning. They are stories, they are artworks that point to a deeper place of transcendence that is the truth of your existence and will help guide you and will help show you how to live. The one caveat I would say, which I think is critical in the world today, is that most people don't know about this, but about 4,000 years ago, there was what was called in the Middle East the Great Reversal. There were these fertile valleys where mainly the worship, so spirituality, I'm arrived at my destination. I don't know where it is. Okay, I'm just gonna turn around here. Most people don't know about this, that, hold on, let me just do this real quick. That, where is this place? I think I gotta pull over, finish this talk, and then go wherever I'm going. Okay, I don't know. Okay. Just gonna pull over. All right, so finishing up the blah blah blah. Many years ago, about 4,000, 5,000 years ago, I don't know the exact time, but right around there was in the Middle East, there were fertile valley cultures that revolved around harvesting and planting.
And whenever you have a pre-modern civilization culture that revolves around planting and harvesting, they worship a goddess entity, a nature, a mother nature. But then what would happen is the herding people that were, mostly men-dominated cultures that had large herds, and they were constantly like looking for new fields for their herds. They were constantly bumping into people, and they were constantly having battles about territory. Then what happens is the accent moves from the female to the male, and the man becomes the dominant figure. And so those herding cultures, both the Semites and the northern tribes, were coming into those areas and invading those fertile valleys. So we don't think about it that way. At least people that are heavily steeped in the Bible, you only think about the winner's story. The winner's story is those herding cultures came in and wiped out those other cultures, those goddess cultures. And then what we have are traditions in the Middle East that completely decimate the feminine aspect, the goddess aspect, and replace it with a man. So there's no more masculine, feminine in spirituality. It's just all masculine. And then Virgin Mary sort of squeaks in from the side and gives us a little bit of feminine, but it's all masculine. So I would say there is truth in all religion, but you also need to take each religion within its cultural context. And in that cultural context, you have to appreciate that there has been this shift 4,000 years ago from feminine to masculine, from goddess to God. It's in the Middle East. And the Middle East then became the greatest exporter of religious ideas and evangelized it around the world. So to sum up, from an agnostic point of view, from a modern day science point of view, from the point of view that we need spirituality in our life, pray to what really creates you. In science today, what really creates us is, the Mother Earth, the Grandmother Ocean, and the Mother Universe. Those are real. Your ancestors, your mother, your father, your grandmother, your great-grandmothers, all the way back to the single-celled organism. That's all part of you. And then your brothers and sisters, the whole community of life that goes from now and then all the way back to the beginning. The other thing I wanted to mention, which I forgot to mention, is the cataclysmic events. I think there's been 7 great mass extinctions. You owe your life to 7 mass extinctions. So currently we are in the Anthropocene death cycle. It's a mass extinction event, and we're part of that cycle. So I don't know whether we're going to stop the Anthropocene from becoming a mass extinction event, but we're inside of it. In the Upanishads, which I don't know very well, there is there's a representation of the cycles of life, and they're 432,000 years or something, these death and life birth cycles. And it's something in the West we struggle with. We don't really do very well with life and death cycles. There's this all, you're going to go to heaven and you're going to live in eternal bliss. Okay. But life and death is the reality of our spiritual existence. I guess I'm going to segue off again. I would say one of the most powerful things you can do as a spiritual agnostic is face identity annihilation. Allow your mind to contemplate the end of your personality. I think a lot of people, when they think about heaven, what they're imagining is their personality going into another realm. And your personality is not going anywhere. This is the only one that you get. You get one personality. Maybe you get something else. I don't know. I'm agnostic about that, but it doesn't make any sense that your personality is going to transcend your body. There's a piece that I'm writing in my book, Personal Ecosystem Design, right now about the body brain. When your body falls apart. So there's this idea in science fiction that we can just take the brain out of the body and stick it in a robot and it'll be the same you. It is not going to be the same you. There's so much connection between the gut, the brain and the gut, and then the whole nervous system, your whole body, like an octopus. You're like an octopus. You have brain parts in your whole body. It just is kind of accumulated up here, but it's everywhere. You remove that, you're no longer human. So whatever this transcendent thing is that may be beyond human is the life force, the consciousness, maybe that part. It's completely consistent with modern day science to say that the drive for consciousness, the self-awareness part could be transcendent of the body. We don't really know. That's an open-ended question. So if you want to put your faith in something, if you want to put your afterlife in something, put it in undifferentiated consciousness. That is definitely something that's real. And maybe there's differentiated consciousness too, like individual blips, blip, 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 like the reincarnation and the soul and all that kind of stuff. But you don't need to have that in order to have a complete spiritual system that holds you up from the inside and gives you power in this life. Joseph Campbell said it best when he said, if you're not going to find heaven here, you're not going to find it anywhere. You have to find it in this life, in this body. You can see people walk around this world all the time, completely disconnected from their life. They're literally walking in hell. Now, hell is here on earth. Heaven is here on earth, and it's up to you to try to find a pathway to it here and now. If you don't get it here, you're not getting it anywhere. So I hope that's helpful. Pray to Mother Earth, all the way back to Grandmother Universe, all of your ancestors all the way back, all your brothers, sisters all the way back, and Father element. Individuality, technology, civilization, free markets. Those are all Father elements. But they're only half of the picture. It's not all about goddamn free markets. That there's a reason that the right wing evangelizes, spiritualizes free markets, because they are an aspect of the Father element. But it's only half of the picture, and it's embedded inside the Mother element anyways. Okay, I hope you found that useful. I really enjoyed giving that talk. I've been wanting to share this stuff for a long time. So leave comments below if you have any questions or comments, or I'd love to hear what you think. Yeah, take care. Have a great day.